Hello, my name is Sergei Golovay, and we are meeting with you in our program Briefly and to the Point. Thank you very much for becoming a part of this program. Today, I believe, and I'm more than sure, we will have a very constructive dialogue, just like the first time, and I hope it won't be the last. We are bringing Denis Yelisevich into our conversation. Denis, hello, it's very nice to meet you and get acquainted.
Hello, Sergey, hello.
I already mentioned this before we went on air, that I watched a number of your broadcasts, and I found it quite amusing, at least to me, your meeting, or probably the best word is debate, with one of the former ministers of Poland. Your arguments, and there are things that I find appealing. And I am grateful to you for being here today to bring them to light. And I called our meeting today The Ukraine We Know and the Ukraine We Dream of, with the caveat that I haven't lived in Ukraine for more than 35 years. America is my country. It's the country where I grew up, the country where I studied, the country that contributed to everything I have at the moment. But still, the years spent here, there, the very fact of my birth and what I went through, of course, leaves a mark. And especially after the events of 2014, even more so. After the events of 2022, you can't look at what's happening with indifference. Denis, in just a few words, if you can, I've heard your self-identification as a political immigrant. What does that mean to you, and why did it happen that way?
It happened because a week after the war began, I opened YouTube. Before that, I wasn't on social media at all. I'm an entrepreneur, and money prefers silence. I kept a low profile, no one knew me, and I was fine with it. When it all started, I more or less understood what Russia would do. I understood how our government would act, and I just couldn't stay silent anymore. I realized I needed to reach out to people. The trigger for me was when they turned off television. They launched a telethon, now the same state channel is on every channel. It's pure propaganda. And that's basically what started it all for me. And everything was going pretty well, but after 4 or 5 months, I started getting signals. Different agencies started contacting me. I can't go into details just out of...
I understand.
To talk about it, but I understood what was going on. I realized where the warning was coming from, and I knew I had to emigrate. That's all. I knowingly took major financial losses, having built my successful business over 10 years. The war didn't ruin it, and I'd still be running it successfully today. Well, things happened the way they did, so it wasn't me who defined myself. People like me are called political emigrants. I don't want to use the loud word dissident. I won't claim that status. There have been people in history who were in much worse circumstances and conditions, so a political emigrant.
Why did you choose America and not Europe, or maybe even Australia?
Well, part of my family are United States citizens. That's the first reason. Second, America is the last bastion of true freedom of speech in the world, the last island of common sense. I have been a longtime supporter of Donald Trump, and I supported him in this election. I mentioned him when I was in Kiev and just starting my YouTube channel. I said he should be president because bad things are happening and causing bad outcomes. As we can see today, this is what it has all led to. And basically that's how it was. There weren't many options. There were only 2 options, so...
People likely laughed and thought you were crazy for saying Donald Trump should return.
Well, of course, we have globalist propaganda working in Ukraine. And of course, they tried to marginalize, tried to say all sorts of things, and of course, to stick that label on Kremlin agent. How could they not? Everyone who is against Zelensky is a Kremlin agent.
I see.
The media situation there is sad.
Denis, literally in a few words. The year 2026 is just around the corner. On August 18th, 1991, Ukraine gained independence. What is your analysis? In 35 years, what has been done, and what could have been done? Where did we miss the ball? Where did we achieve something? And where did we overlook something? Purely from the perspective of someone who was born there, lived there, did business there, and maybe even knows some things from the inside.
Well, I've thought about what went wrong, and if we judge from the very beginning, at first people chose Kravchuk in the first elections, not Chernobyl. Chernobyl was there. He was later killed. Chernovol was a modern person who proposed the federalization of Ukraine, capitalism, democracy, in other words, a normal path for Ukraine to become part of Western civilization after the communist past. Well, our people, you see, people from a post-communist background, chose Kravchuk, who was just a repainted communist. What could a non-professional do? A person who, well, imagine doesn't understand anything. Just a party man who has no skills at all. He couldn't do anything, but what did he manage to do at a later stage? He surrounded himself with 5 or 6 families. Whether it's an oligarch or a few families, it makes no difference. These families got rich because they gained access to state assets, and Ukraine's assets were fantastic under those conditions. In 1991, 52 million people, first of all, the largest country in Europe by territory, nuclear weapons, insane amounts of arms, insane number of enterprises, from a clean slate, without any bloodshed. It's unbelievable in history, considering the starting conditions they had with no bloodshed, I repeat. But then everything began to fall apart after 1991. First, it was like knock knock, who's there? Then the experienced Wolf Kuchma took over, and that's when things started moving. Privatization began among insiders, but true privatization only happened with Krivorishtal. Kuchma's principle was, we take the big stuff, you deal with the small things. Well, I mean, entrepreneurs, he basically didn't touch entrepreneurs. There was this single tax introduced, a very convenient tax base, fixed rates, that's it, nothing else. And thanks to that, some entrepreneurs were able to rise. That was the only island of economic freedom. Overall, the country was being plundered and destroyed. There was a huge dominance of Russian agents everywhere. In the security services, the cabinet of ministers, the presidential administration was run by Federal Security Service agents. It's just unbelievable what was happening. In Crimea, the mafia, the Federal Security Service, and local officials were dividing up Crimea among the 3 of them. Everything that happened is terrible, but it's not the cause of our troubles. It's the result of living the wrong way, the wrong format of the state, the wrong management. That's all. So why is it like this? Impunity. Officials who have gone mad from their lack of accountability. They would come, do things, and see that nothing would happen to them for it, so they kept going. Others watched. If he does it, why shouldn't I do it too, you see? The country needed to be steered toward capitalism, toward the greatest freedoms. Everything had to be privatized right away. Kravchuk's first trip should have been to Washington so that American companies could come in, because Ukraine has nuclear power plants, you know. Now everyone in the world wants to build them. They're multi-billion-dollar enterprises, and some Soviet-era director with a $500 monthly salary is going to run them? Of course he's corrupt. Everything is corrupt now. Ukraine has 3,500 state enterprises, which is why freedom, capitalism, and democracy are needed. If we had moved that way and federalized, there'd be no talk of war, and Ukraine's gross domestic product would surpass Russia's. I believe that.
Dennis, in your subjective opinion, looking at almost 35 years of independent Ukraine's history, which historical period was the best, the most significant?
There is such a period, but it's not because something was done right in Ukraine, but rather because of what was happening in the world. That's the second term of Kuchma and Yushchenko. During that period, things were actually pretty good.
So, you could say that life was improving, people's incomes were rising, and salaries were increasing? Or what will your measure be?
Well, yes, people were getting richer and no one was interfering in the economy. I mean, really, at that time, the oligarchs were doing their own thing and the officials were doing theirs. It was an imperfect system, but one where you could make something of yourself, do something for yourself, no one really bothered you. That was actually pretty good. I began building my business under Yanukovych and made strong progress within a year. Then Maidan happens, the hryvnia drops to 1/3 of its value and you have to start over. Well, of course, living in an unstable country is bad, and the local currency, that's terrible. It's all just a way to rob the population, a weak local currency. That's essentially how it was. But I want to stress it wasn't due to the right actions. It was because the world was growing, capital flowed into Ukraine, foreign banks arrived, and lending was strong. This was the only time in Ukraine's history when easy loans for real estate and cars were available, and people eagerly used them to advance. Gross domestic product growth was strong.
Dennis, it's been almost 4 years since the full-scale war began, the invasion and the destruction that came with it. Right now, I don't know, I haven't checked in the last few days whether the major mega centers of Ukraine are without power, or if there's some regulated schedule with a few hours of electricity in the morning and a few hours in the evening. History does not tolerate the subjunctive mood. As they say, we are, where we ended up. It's painful to watch all of this, and it's even harder to analyze it all. Where are you now regarding the peace process? How do you interpret all of this? How do you assess all of this? Starting with the efforts of Donald Trump, who promised to end all of this in 24 hours. Then the notorious meeting that took place on February 28th of last year, 2025. I'm talking about the Oval Office, Zelensky and Donald Trump, well, and all the other things. Alaska, then the trips, one, another, a third, a fifth. January, the month of 2026. 5 days remain until the first anniversary of Donald Trump's second inauguration. You can't say that nothing has changed. Where are we?
Based on the information I have and my perspective, we are on the home stretch. We are on the home stretch, and thankfully, things are moving forward. They have moved off dead center. The last month and a half have been extremely intense in terms of diplomacy and everything we are watching and observing in the world today. I'm referring to Venezuela, Iran, and Greenland, all tied to a major task President Trump is handling, including where one of the links in the chain, one of those links is Ukraine.
By the way, since you brought it up, we're coming back to Ukraine now since you mentioned Greenland. You've been living here for more than a year, in America, through the eyes of a Ukrainian living in America. How do you understand all this, and how do you communicate all this and talk about it with people who say, well, Trump has completely lost his mind. He's going to send in troops, send in paratroopers to take over Greenland for himself.
Well, mostly these are people who are pro-Russian or don't understand anything. They draw strange parallels. And they, like about Venezuela, they said, oh, he said he would end the war. He ended 8 wars, but now he's starting a war. I say, did anyone bomb anyone? No. What are you talking about? We saw the Maduro operation, with Maduro a surgical operation. About Greenland, it's about buying it. Trump tried to do this in his first term. Now he's already worked on the mistakes he made in his first term. He's behaving differently now. Trump's rhetoric and style, that's just how he is. But I also know that if Greenland is not under the control of the United States, then it will be under the control of Russia and China. This is a very important geopolitical point in Antarctica. And then these people, those in Ukraine who think there are many in Ukraine who are unhappy with what Trump says about Greenland, but they don't realize that without action now, in 10 years Russia and China might bomb Ukraine again, or even Europe or others. And, that is, people need to figure things out first and foremost. I'm convinced that there won't be any military action. Everything will be resolved by business methods, so to speak, by buying and selling. And I want to tell you, people also don't know that Greenland is a heavily subsidized region, meaning Denmark subsidizes them by about $1 billion a year. What's bad about that? The people, the residents of Greenland, will get a lot of money, cash. Denmark will get huge amounts of money and will keep receiving it for 5 or 10 years. American presence is always a plus. No one has ever lost from American presence. And in my opinion, it's all obvious. But people like Trump aren't liked. Bright personalities aren't liked.
Can he finish it by America's 250th anniversary?
They've taken it seriously, yes.
Dennis, actually, by the way, we've already been talking with Dennis for 15 minutes. I want to ask you gentlemen, at the very least, to like this video, leave your comments, get involved in this discussion, and share your opinions. It's preferable that you are able to defend your position. If it's not too much trouble, please share this material on your social networks and groups. Dennis also has a large YouTube channel. Dennis, could you say a few words about how your channel started and where you are now? And, in general, it's a very good source of information for people who identify with your vision regarding the future of Ukraine. Please provide a link.
The channel is called Dennis Yelisevich because that's my name. It's my personal channel. It probably started like most channels. I set up a camera and started recording what I thought. My live streams did really well. As of today, I have 320,000 subscribers. We're moving forward, making progress. Sometimes I get frustrated that I'm still far from 1 million, but on the other hand, if I had 1 million, what happened in Ukraine wouldn't have happened. So, there aren't many people who are focused in this direction, but I have to say, it's not a small number either, because the channel is, you could say, not even 3.5 years old yet. Well, actually, it's just about exactly 3.5 years. So,
by the way, that would have been one of my questions at the very end. What percentage of people identify with what you stand for and what you are fighting for? Just one more question about the peace process. How do you see all this in terms of timing, if possible? And what will the final, ultimate result be? Because it looks like everything comes down to the remaining part of Donetsk region that is under Ukraine, but supposedly Russia claims it. These contingents of military personnel from European countries, how will all this be brought under one common denominator, if it will be?
According to my information, there will be a free economic zone there. This will be a compromise, the very compromise that was talked about. We need to explain to those who don't know or understand that the territory we control in Ukraine is completely unfit for living. And the fact that Zelensky didn't make any compromises before is only because it was easy for him. He's planning to run for president of Ukraine again, for another term, and for him, this is just political suicide. Well, who would vote for a president who, in the opinion of not very smart people, did something wrong with the territories? That's it. So, I think there will be a free economic zone. In 2026, I think a framework agreement will be signed very soon. It will be signed. It will guide future actions. Next will be Ukraine's presidential election, and hopefully the parliamentary one too, since Zelensky cancelled them, which I see as a major mistake and violation. This has hurt Ukraine, leading to a political crisis and humanitarian catastrophe, partly due to the cancelled elections. Officials are getting richer. You see these corruption scandals, and the corruption scandals you see and hear about are only 1% of what is really happening there. War is a gold mine. Officials are behaving even more brazenly than in peacetime. I think Ukraine today is the most corrupt country in the world, and I don't like to admit it, but it's true. And it's also about the poorest country in Europe.
The ideal president, without naming any potential names, according to Denis Yelisevich, who is he or she?
A bright personality with ideas and ideology, not just someone who supports good things and opposes bad things. Someone with strong views, clear direction, and a core capitalist mindset. This is fundamentally important, and a person who respects freedom. This person should declare during the campaign that they will never again close Ukraine's borders or restrict the press and freedom of speech. This is essential, as Ukraine cannot survive without these freedoms. No country has ever thrived under strict limits. I'm not considering China, since it has economic freedoms and is unique in terms of population and location. So it's one of a kind. Everything else, the entire Western civilization, was built on these basic values: economic freedom, freedom of speech, and personal freedom. Unfortunately, the European Union is now moving away from this too, which is another issue. That's why only this way, with a clear, most importantly with a clear economic program, because the economy, above all, comes down to two main things: judicial reform and the economy. Ukraine must switch to Anglo-Saxon law, definitely. The Ukrainian court, I can't even describe what it is to you. And the Ukrainian judicial system, the legal system, that's what it is. Calling it a mess is an understatement. The court must be independent and honest. Honestly, I would take the United States Constitution, adapt it for Ukraine, and adopt it because Ukraine's constitution is terrible. In short, there's a lot of work to do.
Is there such a person in the Ukrainian political field?
No, probably not. Most people unfamiliar with the situation make a mistake here. It's wrong to reason based on the personalities that exist today. If you look at any poll conducted locally in Ukraine today, you'll see the same last names: Poroshenko, Tymoshenko, Zelensky, Zaluzhny, and several other military figures recognized during the war. That's it. Today there's a war, so these names are mentioned. Without the war, the agenda would be different. with freedom of speech and other names instead. People seeking answers should find someone whose words resonate, whom they support, and who offers specifics and a plan. And stick with that person, or several people, if they see more than one like that for themselves. But playing these rating games, watching and measuring all that, it means nothing. Everyone you see in the ratings are absolutely empty politicians. They haven't even defined who they are yet. Left, right, communists, fascists, socialists. Who are you? What do you stand for? None of them have answered a single question clearly. Take Poroshenko's idea. Army, language, faith. What kind of program is that?
So how do we find those ideal ones you're talking about? I think there is a certain percentage of people living in Ukraine who completely agree with this. They're capitalists to the core, people who believe in freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press. Basically, these are people who won't object. To just copy and paste the American Constitution, adapt it to the Ukrainian version, and follow these principles. And by the way, America has something to be proud of. For 250 years, we haven't rewritten it. That's a very serious advantage on our side. Are there such people, and where can you even find them?
I'm just saying, if television is closed off, how else can someone get noticed today? Thanks to technology, you just use your phone to get seen. Of course, on the internet, there's no other source today, and politics in Ukraine will be run by the internet now. Our politics have become internet-based, if you can put it that way. In the last election, almost 7 years ago, with Zelensky, things were different than in America. As far as I know, television played a huge role even in the last elections. So now you see, by turning off television, Zelensky actually made things worse for that old style of politics. Everyone shifted online, so now politics happens on YouTube, Telegram channels, and a bit on Facebook and X. That's just how it is.
Dennis, let me ask you, do you allow for even the slightest chance, even 1/100%? There just aren't people like that in the political field. There aren't people who are willing to make unpopular decisions. Would you object to the idea of a third party coming in? Well, for lack of a better word, a third force, some kind of collective European or collective European-American administration in Ukraine? I don't know. For a period of 2, 3, or 5 years, so that in this post-war nightmare, corruption and everything else on the list could somehow be dealt with to educate and raise a real political elite to whom the reins of government could later be handed over.
Let's break it down into two parts. Regarding the fact that there are no such people, there are such people. I'm telling you 1,000%. Ukrainians are not some foolish nation where you can't find 50 people who know what to do. There are people who can implement and know what I've just told you about. The second part of the question, I am definitely against what you called external control, outside management, or anything like that. Why? Because it will always end up with appointees of globalists like Soros. That's just a fact. We've already been through this after the Maidan in 2014. It was called Euromaidan, the Revolution of Dignity. And then what happened? All the ministers were Soros's people. Some strange people came and simply started tearing Ukraine apart. It's a long story to tell. These state enterprises have supervisory boards, and they put their own people on these boards and make money. Now they're going to make money on the reconstruction of Ukraine. It's a terrifying web. Letting Soros into Ukraine was a big mistake. Now Soros controls 95% of Ukraine's media, several state enterprises, and part of the security services. There are real deep states in Ukraine. Can you imagine? That United States Agency for International Development, which Trump shut down, was giving $10 billion a year to Ukraine. If I had started my activities in those pre-war times, they would have quickly tried to marginalize me too, since it wasn't in their interest. So they have a certain agenda, and you have to stick to it. If you deviate even a little bit, you're labeled a Kremlin agent right away. They put that stamp on you, and that's it. Goodbye.
All right. The globalists have their own agenda. It's set for 10, 15, 20, even 30 years. Let's talk about our own agenda. Let's just put it this way. Denis Yelisevich is the top figure in Ukraine. If not the top, then one of, let's say, even among those 50 people you mentioned who know what to do and how to do it. That's why I'm asking Denis. In Ukraine, there's a post-war, and not just post-war, but a very serious demographic gap, a demographic pit. Denis Yelisevich is the top figure or one of the 50. How does he address this issue? What programs does he propose so that people in America, in Europe, wherever they ended up as a result of the war, would return to Ukraine? What incentives does he offer them? What programs are actually realistic so that, well, excuse me, this is a pressing issue. You said, Dennis, and I really liked it. In 91, there were 52 million people plus enterprises. Yes, the biggest asset is people.
Yes.
And having 52 people in Ukraine, it's really an amazing starting point. What are we doing to make these people start coming back to Ukraine bit by bit?
Look, I have a program. I could name it with numbers, but I won't, because that would really tire people out. I'll speak more generally. The most neoliberal economy, well, a libertarian economy in the world. We deserve this because a terrible war has occurred and continues in Ukraine. People should have the opportunity to prosper. Europe is burdened with taxes, reaching 40–50%. Ukrainians, if you want people to return, offer the lowest taxes and the greatest freedoms in our homeland, more than anywhere else in Europe or the world. And what is that already? An honest court, that's already a lot. Believe me, when you live at home and you have all this, look, why did people leave? You know, there are a lot of Ukrainians in Poland. You're aware of this, and even before the war, those were our migrant workers, and during the war as well. What did people get in Poland? Laws for people, by which it turns out you can live peacefully without breaking anything. The government doesn't pressure you, doesn't look for ways to get at you. The tax authorities don't barge in. There are no raids, no special services trying to squeeze you. Nobody is suppressing you. In Ukraine, there's no such thing as a mortgage. Can you imagine? This tool simply doesn't exist. It's like the Middle Ages. Over there, people get it with clear starting conditions for 20–15 years. They all found housing, their kids attend kindergarten or school, and they have jobs or businesses. The courts are fair and the economy stable. In Poland, the tax system is relatively decent compared to Europe, though they also have value-added tax, which is the worst tax. In Ukraine, value-added tax is much higher, and it's terrible, like the sales tax in America. That's a more proper way. And here's the argument. The issue of war and security is, of course, also important. What happened in Ukraine now? People have lost trust in the government. There wasn't much of it to begin with. But when the borders were closed, that was it. Because no matter what anyone says, believe me, if the borders hadn't been closed, the mood in society would be different today. Families have broken up. A wife and child left for months or over a year. Another man moves in, while the husband hides from the territorial recruitment center or is already at the front, risking his life. Some have died. Today, senior classes in Ukraine have only 10–15 students instead of 30. That's it. Everyone has been taken out. Everyone is being taken out. Boys are being taken out for obvious reasons. And mothers say about the girls, there won't be any suitors here. What's the point of staying? And they leave for abroad. Everyone already sees this as a demographic catastrophe in Ukraine. And if not, the new president should give an inspiring speech in which he will talk about all this and start acting on it the very next day. The nation must be emotionally engaged, including discussing success and life in Ukraine. Today, the current politicians, the potential ones we've discussed, those who are on the political stage now, all have the same agenda. We are the shield of Europe. As Ursula von der Leyen said, a steel porcupine, our fate is to suffer. An anthem to die to, that's great, to terrible melodies. Everything is awful, it's a big trench filled with blood, and our fate here is to die. I'm telling you how it's being presented today. That's it. A Ukrainian is not born, like an American, to self-actualize, to earn money, to breathe freely, to say what he wants to say. It's just, you see, it's, well, plus bad genes, well, the DNA gene has shown up in many. Here are the children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren of People's Commissariat for Internal Affairs officers. Today in Ukraine, people are reporting each other just like in Russia, over words or actions. This must stop. The national focus should be on individual success, leading to national prosperity. Also, Ukraine should integrate into the global economy. There's a lot of discussion now about security guarantees and who will protect us, similar to NATO. American business is the best security guarantee. No one will bomb an American enterprise.
In your opinion, how soon is it possible to make Ukraine a place where Ukrainians would want to return? Not to mention people like me, for example, who have lived here for 35 years. And they think, well, why not buy some property? Why not spend some time each year there in their historical homeland? How much time will it take to create such a Ukraine? After the war?
I really liked it and was glad when Marco Rubio said, "I've told this story before, that Ukraine's gross domestic product could surpass Russia's in 10 years. Many people who thought I was just telling wild stories were speechless after hearing that. Trump is impulsive and unpopular with many, but Marco Rubio is the calmest, most balanced on his team. Yet he made this statement, which many disliked. 10 years. That's up to a fantastic Ukraine. Ukraine's current gross domestic product is $150 billion, but we should aim for $1 trillion. I'm convinced that if we do everything right, we'll be a fantastic country in 3 years." I'm not exaggerating right now. In 3 years, Ukraine could be a completely different country. Society could be completely different. It will be a totally different country. Only the name will remain. Everything else will be completely different. 3 years, 5 years, that's a full plan. 1 presidential term.
All right, this way we address the problem of the demographic crisis. Your economic program. Again, not to repeat myself. Dennis, are you the main figure, or one of 50, directly the brain of the country, a person who is part of the decision-making process? How do we restore the economy of a country that relies on subsidies, that is basically begging from the world, as they say, collecting scraps from everyone just to make a shirt for the poor? How do we get a country in the center of Europe up and running? It's actually the largest country in terms of land area, at least in Eastern Europe. How do we get this engine running, not just on all 12, but on 24, 36 cylinders? Whatever you want to call it.
First, there's nothing to restore because there was nothing to begin with. Gross domestic product was $150 billion before and remains about the same during the war, thanks to American and European aid. It's not like the economy plummeted from $500 billion to $100 billion. Let's be honest, we were already an unsuccessful country living on subsidies. When the International Monetary Fund loaned Ukraine €1 billion a few times a year, the entire government would celebrate. We're alive, guys. I mean, it's like a patient on a ventilator just being given oxygen so he doesn't physically die. But this person isn't really living, not in life, not in consciousness. That's how the country was run. So what needs to be done in the economy? I've already talked about taxes. Remove the value-added tax, implement a sales tax or a transaction tax. 10% tax on withdrawn capital, meaning a profit tax. The same tax on salaries. That's ideal because everyone will pay it. In Ukraine, when taxes are 30 or 40%, money is laundered. You need a tax rate people are willing to pay so they can live peacefully. Get rid of all the bureaucracy. In Ukraine, the administration of everything is just idiotic. All these licenses and so on. Privatize all 3,500 state enterprises, especially those called strategic, energy, natural resources. All of that should be working, and preferably in the hands of American companies. Next, establish a stock market in Ukraine, since there's no real exchange and it's hard to attract investment. Open Ukraine to the global economy. This is crucial. Allow foreign banks to operate fully, not just as branches, so lending and money flow can begin. Stop restricting money. Ukrainians should easily move money in and out of the country and hold multiple currencies. Well, ideally, of course, dollarization of the economy, I'll be honest with you, because the hryvnia is just a tool for robbing the population. Ideally, since it's the Eurozone, let it be the euro, some kind of strong, real currency. And these are the starting conditions, the very first ones that I've mentioned to you. Well, without total privatization, you know why? Total privatization is a breeding ground for corruption. In Ukraine, there's the Anti-Corruption Bureau. We need to fight corruption. We'll fight corruption. Corruption stems from state-owned enterprises and too many officials. The government should cut its size by 70%. Today, artificial intelligence now does about 50-60% of the work that minor clerks handle. That's it, period. We need to cut expenses, reduce spending. They're just inflated beyond belief. In Ukraine, entire ministries should be closed because they're full of idlers and thieves. The national bank should also be dissolved as they're thieves who take printed money for themselves and their associates. And there are entire networks there, and they all end their careers as multimillionaires. Meanwhile, the people are poor, or even in the grave. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians, as you know. That's a quick summary of the reform program for you.
Dennis, I can't help but ask, what books have you read that shaped your views? Who was your top teacher? Because the things you're talking about are music to my ears. I'm listening with pleasure and I would even say with tenderness, because this is truly a well-trodden path. This isn't something new, made up out of thin air. These are systems. Call it what you want, it works. It works.
It's the only thing that works. All wealthy countries today have gone down this path, and we need to do what those countries did at the beginning of their journey, not what countries in Europe with large economies are doing today. They're introducing regulations, but that won't work for Ukraine.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's for European Union supporters, but it will ruin Ukraine.
Who pushed you? Maybe some books, some seminars you attended, some gurus well, who was your teacher in this aspect?
To be honest, I got into this through business. That is, when you do business, you become an economic entity, and you see what works, what brings in money, what kills, what holds you back. Probably, when you spend 70% of your time thinking about how to do things right so that the government doesn't strangle you, that's not a normal situation. You should spend 99.9% of your time on business and just 0.1% on paperwork if you have the right system. Well, moving on. Well, Ludwig von Mises, for example. So, things like that, which most libertarians have, I came to libertarianism. There was a figure in Ukraine named Hennady Balashov. Unfortunately, he passed away 2 months ago. He created the first libertarian party in Ukraine. He inspired people with this. At that time, people were drawn to him. And that's how it was, little by little, everywhere. The main thing is business. You come to this through business. So it's not like you get a magical book in your hands. You have an epiphany. And as you rightly said, it's not that I'm some kind of genius who invented something completely new. All of this was tried before, and only one thing has worked. Nothing else has succeeded anywhere.
In this case, I have to ask you, given this situation, Ukraine and the European Union, because there's a very common mantra among Ukrainian society. The European Union will make us rich, and NATO will protect us. In this model that you are promoting, well, maybe promoting is too strong a word, that you are initiating or supporting, where does the European Union fit in? As Ukrainians, should we stay away from this system? Or where will the points of contact be, and to what extent?
Trade with the European Union is duty-free. Visa-free travel is essential. Money flows easily for business and travel with no issues. But if we talk about taking Ukraine today and imposing European bureaucracy on it, that will kill everything that is still somehow alive there. All small and medium-sized businesses will be destroyed. Today, even freedom of speech is under threat there. Financial monitoring, there is such a problem in Ukraine. Financial monitoring. In Dubai, in Monaco, there is no financial monitoring. You bring money there and nobody asks you anything. But in Ukraine, for $1,000, you have to show a whole stack of documents, and you can't just go and freely buy an apartment. You must show and prove everything. What do you expect when half of Ukraine's economy operates in the shadows? For 35 years, people have adapted to this inherited system. It's not about being a bad entrepreneur. It's about surviving in your country. Financial monitoring should exist, but only at the minimum level accepted globally. They want information shared across Europe, and they're restricting money transfers so you can't even send 1,000 euros freely. Sending 10,000 euros gets you treated like a millionaire and inspected thoroughly as if you're new to the country. So this is idiocy, and Ukraine doesn't need it. I don't see a single reason today why we need the European Union, not a single reason at all. If you give Ukrainians European passports, another 5 million may leave, which is actually one of their goals for Ukraine. You hear that today they're already bringing in people from India, Nepal, Pakistan, Bangladesh.
By the way, speaking of the free flow of money, even America isn't what it used to be. In the first years of our emigration, I worked in management, and there was a man from Iran. He once complained to me and said yes, before I could make just one call, and apparently his family, who stayed in Iran, are very wealthy people. He said, They used to easily send $50, $70, or even $100,000, and receiving it in America was never a problem for me. No one asked me anything, no questions. I didn't have to fill out or sign any papers. Of course, all of that started to be restricted. For $10,000, you had to report it. Well, after September 11th, everything changed in a significant and concrete way. Dennis, basically, if we don't address the demographic problem, if we don't have post-war programs in Ukraine that address this issue, then in 5, 10, 15, or 20 years, Ukraine will be unrecognizable demographically. Because people will be brought in there.
They're already bringing them in.
Yes, they're already bringing them in. If we don't address this, if we don't build our own Ukrainian post-war economic model, then we'll just end up being subordinate in the European Union. A country that's somewhere far, far away, just trying to survive and constantly begging, help us, give us a loan for this, a loan for that, a loan for something else. But most of all, and what I would like to talk to you about, is Dennis, whether he's the main figure or one of the 50 people making decisions about the Ukrainian post-war national idea. Because dealing with your future is one thing, but arranging your present is another. But looking into the future and telling the next generations that this is the country where you and your children and your children's children will live, that's something else. The National Ukrainian Post-War Program, what it looks like, how it is presented according to Denis Yelisevich.
Wealth, happiness, and success are at the heart of the national idea. Just as people mention the American dream, there should be a Ukrainian dream linked to individual material success. It's essential to eliminate that old Soviet mindset within ourselves. Whether it's the Ukrainian secular state or Orthodox religious rules, both impose unnecessary things. That's why I support the American Constitution. Freedom of religion, that's also a problem in Ukraine right now. Language, religion, all of that, that's exactly what divides people. That's why, you see, when a person is focused on their own success, they won't have time to fill their head with nonsense. For example, what's your religion? Or why do you speak that language? Politicians won't be able to throw in these artificial questions. And most importantly, then Ukraine will develop. That is, we need to create conditions where a person can provide for themselves. But they don't want that. They need poor and frightened people. It's the perfect situation. The country is being bombed, there's no power, and everyone is poor. It's very easy to control people like that. But when Ukrainians become well off, they'll start asking questions. They'll come to different thoughts, to different views, and that's an extremely dangerous situation. That's why it's only this way, through each person's success. I insist Ukraine is a country where you can live successfully, freely, and comfortably, not as you described. So what do European officials call us? A buffer. A buffer between us and Russia, so let them die there. We know they're stealing our money there, let it be. But we live in peace. That's completely unacceptable to me.
And by the way, that note was constantly present in your debate with the former Polish minister. And I'm just surprised how anyone could miss that. Which, in general, for them, for those living on the other side of the Ukrainian border, is quite a suitable option. You handle things there, you send your guys to the front, you do it, and we'll take care of our own business in comfort and coziness. Gentlemen, we've already been talking for 45 minutes with Denis Yelisevich, who's with us for the first time today. I hope not the last. Denis, I can't help but ask you as well. By the way, since Poland is on the agenda, or rather, since there's a reference to that minister from Poland, I was surprised. During the war, I was in Ukraine 4 times, and for obvious reasons, I had to enter through Poland. I had never been there before. It was never part of my travels. I was shocked. I was really shocked at how the Poles, in general, have polished their country. And I believe that Ukraine can do something similar and in a very, very short time.
Poland is now among the world's top 20 largest economies, which is fantastic. My parents used to sell things there, and in the early 90s there was only poverty. Today it's among the top 20 European and world economies. You'll see skyscrapers, foreign company offices, and nice cars there.
There was once an article, I don't know, maybe even in the Wall Street Journal. It said that in general, the economic growth of this country during a certain historical period surpassed everything in the last 500 years. That is, the leap that Poland made during a certain period of time, I don't remember if it was 5, 7, or maybe even 15 years, they exceeded all expectations. And if Ukraine could find itself there, or even in better circumstances in 10 or 15 years, we can only wish for that. Dennis, why did it turn out this way? How can this be explained? Who is responsible for all of this? The war has been going on for 4 years, and for 4 years the Ukrainian information space has been dominated by people with questionable reputations and pasts, without naming names. Why haven't people figured it out in 4 years?
It's an information vacuum, you see. Yes, there's the internet, and indeed a smart person could go online and look something up for comparison. But still, when you live in a daily agenda, in a bubble, you fall under this influence. As I already told you, 95% are pro-globalists. What did they do? Young people are a separate strategy. They hired entertainment bloggers, mostly ages 20 to 30, and now pay them 50,000 euros a month. They gave them exemption from the war, and they promote this agenda, which spreads that very failure we discussed with you. You were born to donate and go die in the war. You weren't born for anything else. And they promote this openly. Young people keep pushing it and pushing it. The telethon works, and every major Ukrainian website is linked to Soros, funded by these foundations or associated businessmen. Any major site, that is the top 10 media outlets. Previously, it was 5% oligarchic and 95% under globalist control. And that's why people... It's a very complicated process, And what role did the war play here? Our failure is due to the war. Without it, we would have delivered, though Ukraine was already struggling and Zelensky had damaged the economy beforehand. They were planning a revolution in Ukraine around that time. Without the war, there would have been a revolution, and Zelensky wouldn't have finished his term. The war saved him politically. I'm telling you this. I state it with full responsibility. And that's how it turned out. Putin is definitely the aggressor, but when we talk about Europe and the way they treat us, it's also partly our fault. They looked and thought, well, look, they have a great country, but they don't resist this rotten system. Moreover, there was a president who was actually willing to go to war, and Putin is the aggressor. Putin attacked. But let me put the question this way. Could this war have been avoided? Yes, it could have been. Definitely. Did Zelensky do everything he could? No, he did nothing.
Dennis, how could it have been avoided?
At that time, certain agreements had to be fulfilled. They were terrible, I'll say that, but is what happened now any better? It wasn't me. It wasn't you. It wasn't the people who brought us to this situation. It was the politicians and officials who led us here. They should have negotiated. I get it. I wanted to join NATO, but they won't accept us. I now support Austrian-style neutrality. Why push the NATO issue? Why did Poroshenko add NATO to the constitution just 3 months before elections and without a referendum? What was the purpose? Then. And the language. Why, if half the population in Ukraine is Russian-speaking, these are super patriots of Ukraine. They all hate Putin, but they speak Russian. Well, we used to be one country. That's just how history turned out. Switzerland has 4 languages. In America, people speak whatever language they want. In Canada, there are 2 languages, and there are plenty of countries like that. In Belgium, a parliament member uses an earpiece. There are 4 languages, but it's just for communication. Yes, Soros raised these issues. These media outlets focused only on this. They claim to be anti-Russia, but actually turned the country into Russia 2.0 using the same methods and obscurantism, just reversed with their own values. They fueled a suspicious sense of greatness, leading to predictable results. That's why, and you understand, when a country is poor, it's a tempting target for Putin. If we were rich, look at what Poland did. They built up their economy, and today they're buying American weapons, the best ones, South Korean ones, building up their army. They did great by joining NATO. We should have joined when the Baltics and Poland did. This situation likely wouldn't have happened. Why didn't it? That's the question. So Ukraine came to this point. You see, when a country lives like this, not the right way, Something will happen, some kind of disaster, sometimes a civil war happened, then Russia started a war. None of this justifies Putin. It's not right to fight, to attack your neighbors. But I wonder, how did we live before? Now I observe people. If this doesn't show we must change everything and that the old model doesn't work, I don't know how to save Ukraine. Then it really will become a buffer zone with foreign citizens.
Yes, there is one thing that remains undeniable. There are problems within society that cannot be solved by $1 million, $1 billion, or even $1 trillion. Neither European institutions, nor American ones, nor even European and American institutions combined. Society itself must solve this and say, we're starting everything anew. We're starting everything differently. Dennis, it was a pleasure spending time with you. We've spent almost a whole hour together. You are in exile, and you have one weapon, your word. Keep using it. Keep voicing your vision for the future of Ukraine. Some people will agree with certain things, while others won't agree with all. But it's important for this coalition of people to rise up. People who are absolutely convinced that there is a future worth living for, and maybe even worth risking something for, so that our children and our children's children can truly have a guaranteed, good, prosperous, and welcoming country. Maybe even a country that others might envy. It was very, very nice to meet you. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Denis Yelisevich was with us today. Before we say goodbye, I'd like to ask you to like this video, leave your comments and thoughts, share your position, join this dialogue, and be an integral part of it. If it's not too much trouble, please share this material on your social networks and in your groups. If you haven't subscribed to our channels yet, Denis's channel is a very large YouTube resource. Do it. Click the bell. Get notifications about new materials. And also take a minute to subscribe to our channel and click the bell to receive notifications about new materials that are constantly being uploaded to this YouTube resource. And of course, in this world of misunderstandings, chaos, and disorder, may the Almighty Himself grant each of us His peace, which surpasses all understanding. Thank you once again for your time. Until next time.